Good morning, everyone. Given the nature of last night, I think the purpose of this meeting is very vital to the city of Houston and to its business community in particular. And I would like to thank our panel very much for taking time out at this time to join us. And with that in mind, I would like to introduce our panel. To my very left is Judge Nate McDonald from the county of Matagorda. Next to him is Janice Jucker, who is a co-owner of Three Brothers Bakery. Next to her is Chris Hurd, who is the city manager for the city of Dickinson. And on the other side is George Buenik, the director of Houston's Mayor's Office of Public Safety and Homeland Security. Right here, we have Mark Sloan, the Emergency Management Coordinator for Harris County and the Office of Emergency Management. And next to me, we have our moderator, Shaun Miller, who is from the Department of Public Safety, Division 2, Texas Division of Emergency Management State Coordinator. Okay, so with a round of applause, I'd like to thank them very much for coming.
Welcome and good morning. Thank you for attending today's panel discussion, a workshop to help you build disaster resilience for your small business, here at the SCORE Small Business Awards event. For the next 2 hours, maybe a little bit less, depending on how the questions come from our great audience here, we'll discuss and focus sharing ways small business owners can protect their employees, customers, and themselves before, during, and after disaster. As introduced, my name is Shaun Miller. I am the state coordinator for the Southeast Texas region for the Texas Division of Emergency Management, which is a division within the Department of Public Safety. Our panel has already been introduced, but what I'd like to do just for a few minutes is just let them introduce themselves a little bit more in detail. We'll start with Mark first, and there's a microphone around.
Thank you, Shaun. Good morning.
Good morning.
Everybody get a good night's sleep? Yeah, we were a little busy until about 1:30 in the morning last night with the rain. So I'm the coordinator for Homeland Security and Emergency Management in Harris County. And our staff is responsible for preparing for, responding to, recovering from, and hopefully mitigating the risks and threats that we have here in Harris County. In Harris County, we have a federally declared disaster on average every 9 months since 1953. So if you're not prepared or you do not think it's going to happen, it will. Last night on television, we had individuals who stepped out of their homes who said they lived here for 25 years and they've never seen it rain this hard in their neighborhood. Now, if you've been here for Allison or for Harvey or any of the other rain events and the floods that we've had, and you have not flooded, you will. You will. Everyone in the county is susceptible to flooding. It's a known fact, and it will happen. So we have to be prepared for those things. And unfortunately, in the next few days, it's going to happen. We're looking at a pretty severe amount of rain and flooding potential, and it's going to happen. But our office is supposed to go out, and we do outreach. We work with small business. We work with our large major corporations, because sometimes their corporate headquarters is somewhere else, and they don't realize what the impacts are. But our role and our responsibility is to make sure that every resident, 4.7 million people that reside in Harris County, which is the third largest county in the United States, and the unincorporated part of Harris County, if it was a city, would be the fourth largest jurisdiction in the United States. There's a lot of people that reside here that need to understand risk and threat. Those people work for you, and they're taking care of themselves, their family, and their property. And you have a responsibility to take care of being able to get back up and operational as quickly and effectively as possible. And this morning, hopefully we can cover that and help you be able to get through the next event. But that's what our office does. is plan for, respond to, recover from, and help mitigate the potential risks and threats that exist here in Harris County. George?
Thank you, Mark.
Right. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is George Buenik. I'm the Director of Public Safety and Homeland Security for the City of Houston. Mark and I share a lot of the same or similar job responsibilities, him on behalf of the county, myself on behalf of the city. I have pretty much three main functions that I oversee. One is the 911 call center for the City of Houston. We run about 2.8 million calls a year, and we answer the phone in less than 10 seconds, about 98% of the time. So we really have a great state-of-the-art system, and we work in conjunction with the Greater Harris County 911 system and board to keep us up and running every day. The other part of my job, third, is Homeland Security. We juggle about $56 million in Homeland Security grant funding to keep the city, the county, and actually a five-county region safe. We buy all kinds of equipment. We purchase, we do training exercises, including, hurricane and flash floods and different terrorist type activities for training exercises to ensure that we're properly prepared. And then the third main function of my job, which seems to be the one that keeps me the busiest, is I oversee the Office of Emergency Management. And just like Mark and his staff, we were up past midnight last night trying to coordinate all the city resources. So part of my job is to make sure that the city's properly prepared, just like the county, to prepare to respond to, mitigate, recover, and make sure that we move the resources in proper place. We're going to be busy the next couple days. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
I'm Janice Jucker. I'm co-owner of Three Brothers Bakery with my husband Bobby back there. We've been in, actually today is our 70th anniversary, and at 4 o'clock, y'all come to our Braeswood location and come have cake with us and celebrate. So we're a full-line retail bakery with 3 stores and a production facility. I think the reason, we have 65 employees. As I said, we've been in business 70 years, and I think the reason that I'm sitting here is because our business since 2001 has worked through 4 floods, a fire, and a hurricane, and we're still in business. And so you never want to qualify to be in this chair, y'all, okay? But hopefully, if you have a disaster, hopefully I'll give you some pointers on what to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Chris Hurd. I'm the city administrator in the city of Dickinson, and I have a different perspective because for the last 15 plus years, I spent most of my career in the state of Missouri, and I actually took over the city of Dickinson from a recovery standpoint. So I was hired last year in March of 2018. So I think part of the reason I'm here is from the mitigation and the recovery aspect. As Dickinson was highly impacted, 80% of our structures were impacted through Harvey. So we had 52 inches of rain, and so we've got a 22-mile bayou that has our name that has very little of it in our incorporated limits. And then we've got about 37,000 linear feet of tributaries that need definite maintenance and flood control and those kind of things. So I have been, since coming to Texas, I've sort of hit the ground running and walking through all of the federal processes, whether it's the alphabet soup of PA, HMGP, CDBG, and TDEM, all the little alphabets that come through, and lining out all that funding and making sure all that documentation is there. So, and what happens at our level, at a community level, is the same thing that you guys go through. So there's definitely some tips and stuff that I think I can share with you. And what's interesting is I too was out until about 1:30 last night, but I was actually looking at some of the improvements that I had made and making sure that the hydrology and the science behind the construction was actually happening as it said. And so that was I was actually looking at several projects and things that we have undertaken in the last 90 to 120 days to see if they were functioning as I was promoting they would function and as our hydrologists and engineers said they would. So that's how I spent my evening.
Thank you. Good morning. My name's Nate McDonald. I believe what I'm here for is to bring the rural aspect to this morning's affair. I'm the county judge in Matagorda County. I was just elected to my 4th term in November, and so I quite enjoy the work. I'm a former businessman. I retired in 2006, and I thought I was headed to my home in New Mexico to be a professional ski patroller. By that time, I had 15 years as a ski patroller. And so I had a lot of experience in emergency management. It was typically, though, one-on-one, or maybe one-on-3. We had some triages where buses ran off of roads and we had to rappel down and rescue them and those sorts of things. So I don't come to emergency management bereft of knowledge. I come, frankly, with having spent a lot of time saving people's lives on mountainsides in New Mexico. My view, and I think I'll certainly bear this out, is that any county judge in the state of Texas's top job should be emergency management. By statute, we're the emergency management director in each of the 254 counties. And if you're not looking at that as your top job, you're either delusional or you just don't care for those you've been elected to serve. I do care for those I've been elected to serve. I don't need a job. I don't need a paycheck. But what I do need to see is a great rural county built under my direction and with my team, and that's exactly what I set out to do, was to build the best rural county in the state of Texas. Now, it takes all pieces of it to do it. You have to protect health, safety, and property in times of emergency. In my 2nd year, I got a real good bite at that apple with Hurricane Ike coming along. I was fortunate to know already Judge Ed Emmett and Mayor Bill White and Mayor Lida Ann Thomas over in Galveston, knew Judge Sylvia well in Chambers County, and also got to know Judge Yarborough quite well in Galveston County. We worked together as a team to rebuild and to put back together this region that was cast asunder, is what I'll say, from Hurricane Ike. It was a horrible disaster, and it was frankly the poster child for disaster in America in 2008. That was a bit of a challenge, but it's not as big of a challenge as what happened in Harvey, because concurrently we had Harvey happen, and then we had Florida happen, and we had Puerto Rico happen, and we had fires happening. So we've kind of had to split the baby with FEMA over the funds that come down here. Now, I will say that our governor's done a very good job, and others have done a very good job lobbying for funds in Washington, so we're getting some funds down, but we're not releasing them nearly as quickly or nearly as easily as we did during Hurricane Ike. It's a tough draw to actually get the dollars in hand to go do projects that you need to do to stand your county or your jurisdiction back up. So I hope that as we all visit here today, perhaps you all give us some good ideas, because I got to go back and go to work this afternoon, and my biggest job these days is recovering from Harvey. And that said, we weren't harmed near as badly as anyone else. We were kind of an island, is what I'll say. There was a disaster on either side of us. We're, my home in Palacios, I live in Bay City. I have a home in Palacios as well on the bay. It's 100 miles from Rockport. Actually, it's about 70 miles. Bay City's 100 miles. So Rockport, you all may know, Rockport Fulton was kind of the epicenter for landfall in Hurricane Harvey. And if you didn't go there and see it, if you've ever seen war movies, well, it looked the same. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible thing to see what Judge Mills went through and his mayors. Nevertheless, again, we're going to continue to pull together. Though they're not in our cog, we advocate fiercely for our friends just south of us to get stood back up. That's the way Texans, and my belief, should be doing. We all should be pulling together. We should be prioritizing who needs the help worst, and we should be sending the dollars there and getting things done. But what that takes in order to get that done is folks being honest about their needs and truly prioritizing with their regional brethren where those dollars should go. We were very good at that in Ike, and we're attempting to be very good at it again, and I think we're doing pretty good. I will say, and you all probably know, being in the business that we're all in, that Houston and Harris County got a direct set-aside, so we shouldn't have to talk about funding for them. Unfortunately, we continue to have to, and the rest of us, Dickinson in particular, at the Houston-Galveston Area Council, we have to advocate all the time for you all, because you all were horribly affected. I've seen it. You all have a member on our board that I'm quite fond of, the good Reverend sits on our board, And he asks us all the time to send funds down there, and I, for one, will vote in that way because that's a priority. Yeah, I know you do, and you need them. And so that's my thing, is to work together with the region. That's why I'm here today. I believe that regionalism has a big part, and it certainly has a huge part in disaster recovery. And if we don't work together, we're not going to recover near as well or near as fully. So, Shaun, thank you for letting me visit.
There are different phases of emergency management that we'll discuss today. And the first one is preparedness. As we know, the Southeast Texas region is no stranger from disasters, and we ordered up yesterday's storm specifically for this event, so it would be fresh in your memory and it would provide that much more attention to the topics that we're going to discuss. But just in over 3 weeks, the start of the Atlantic hurricane season will begin. I know we all have been really watching that. Regardless, though, if it's weather-related effects from a hurricane or severe seasonal storm, building a disaster resilience for your small business is vitally important. So our icebreaker question to kick things off is directed first to Chris. But with any question, our panelists are more than welcome to add any additional information that they would like. So after an emergency, we are told we may need to survive on our own for several days depending on the severity of the disaster. We were even told that we should have enough supplies to last at least 72 hours or 3 days or more. So Chris, what are the best things to have in that emergency kit? And are these things difficult to obtain?
They are, is this on? Yeah, okay. They are not. And most of the things, and that's true, you definitely should be able to survive on your own for a foreseeable future, because a lot of the law enforcement and emergency personnel are definitely sticking to an EOC plan and execution. So we're not going to be able to take off and do one-offs of I need help here, I need help there. So the biggest thing is water, food, batteries, lots. Cell phones is one of the biggest thing that we found and that I was told about in Harvey is we didn't really lose power in Dickinson, but obviously we couldn't plug in the phones or anything like that. And so the biggest thing that I would say is to go ahead and get on Amazon and buy a couple of spare batteries, have them charged up, have a couple of battery packs so that you can, and put them, go get back in Missouri we called them river bags, but get them that's completely waterproof, seal them up, and just set them in an elevated area within your business so that as a disaster comes, you can go through that battery, go through the next battery, have a charging station so that you can kind of keep the lines of communication open, because, and we'll talk about that, but I think that's the biggest thing is the more informed you are and the better you're going to be able to react. So other things is, a whistle or something to make sure you can signal for help, and then you've also dust mask and just general toiletries. Those are all things, a local map maybe, just in case you don't have your batteries, just so that you can understand situational awareness as emergency personnel is sort of communicating affected areas. You can give yourself a little better situational awareness.
And as a business owner, should I be concerned about having that at my place of employment, or should I just worry about it having at my home so that I can, I'll get to my house and I'll be fine there if a disaster were to happen while my business is open?
Yeah, so I definitely have it at both, and I would know where it is, and I would have it in a secure place, and like I said earlier, I would have it elevated if possible, so that as events are occurring, it's not being affected by the event itself.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
I think that as a business owner, something that you might consider doing as well is taking a picture and documenting your inventory. Take a picture of the facility in its existing state today, because that's going to be the first question is what did it look like before the disaster? And that's the same thing at home. Do a home inventory, and you can put it on a thumb drive. And in that thumb drive, you should also put a copy of your title, your insurance, copies of your prescriptions for medications. And that becomes very important if you have to evacuate and you can't get back, because everything is in that desk drawer. And that desk drawer is now in Matagorda County because it's gone. And And you got to understand that the things you take advantage of on a blue sky day, on a gray sky day, it becomes very difficult to find. We found that for residents that came here from New Orleans during Katrina for shelters. And we found that for people that ended up losing their properties completely during the flooding of Harvey. They didn't have the documents. That slows down your individual or business recovery. So document as much as you can today, store that information, and don't store it in the same drawer that you have the papers. Take it off-site, put it somewhere safe, or make sure that you have it with you as you move around. That'll become very important.
I love talking about community preparedness, so I'm going to impart some knowledge too. We spend $2.5 million in the 5-county region on community preparedness. And what's the message that we try and relay? Make a plan, build a kit, stay informed, and know your neighbors. And that know your neighbors is probably one of the most important things. And so from a business perspective, if you're in a strip shopping center or other businesses on the same street, you need to make sure that you develop relationship, that you know the other people, because you may be off-site. You may have been downtown and, you know, your business is in the north end of town and you don't know what's going on, you know. So you need to be able to call somebody. People get information from a variety of different sources. Some people may know somebody in emergency management and get maybe some inside information. Hey, what exactly is going on? What should we expect? So, you know, from the business perspective, I think you need to get together in your business community in the area that's affected and develop relationships and talk among each other. One of the first questions asked was, you know, what should we have in the kit? The city of Houston and Harris County, we send out and have available online this disaster preparation guideline. And let me give you 2 websites. One's going to be HoustonEmergency.org, HoustonEmergency.org, and the other one is ReadyHarris.org, ReadyHarris.org. The first one is the city of Houston's emergency management website. The second one is the Harris County. And you can download a copy of the emergency management, guide, and it has 4 pages of different checklists of things that you need, you know, in emergencies and in building a kit. It has evacuation guides. It has any type of information you need. The guide is available in 6 different languages. It's in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, Arabic, and French. You know, we feel that these are probably the most common languages spoken in the city of Houston. And we really encourage people to download this guide, look at it, and keep it handy. When we're also talking about preparedness, don't forget about your pets. Don't forget about the pets, and I see some people nodding their heads. The pets need a kit. The pets need a kit. You need dog food. You need dog medication. You need, you know, other things to take care of your dog, your cat, your fish. You know, when we're looking at power, you know, be prepared. We used to say, you know, 2 to 3 days. You know, maybe without power, without food. We're now saying 7 to 10 days. 7 to 10 days. You know, make sure that you're prepared. You know, during Ike, you know, a lot of people went out and bought generators after that. You know, you got to remember during Ike, some parts of town lost power for 3 weeks. Some people were out. You know, so you got to think of, you know, major medical people, and lastly, you know, for your homes. Know your neighbors. Look out for the people that can't look out for themselves. Look out for the elderly. Look out for the access and functional need folks. During Ike, we had a 85-year-old lady that lived down our block, and we invited her into our house. She's living there by herself, family out of town. So, you know, the city and the county have a lot of resources, but we don't have enough resources where we have to care for, 6 million people in the Houston-Harris County neighborhood. So we look at, neighbors helping neighbors is one of the things that we really depend on.
So I come here with the small business perspective, and probably the number one thing in my emergency preparedness kit is my insurance policy. And I just want to get a show of hands. How many of you have read your insurance policies? Oh, that's more than normal. Okay. So number one thing that you should do today is go back to your office or home and read your insurance policy line by line with a highlighter, because there will be some things probably missing, and you could get that fixed, and that's going to make a huge difference on how you recover. The other thing, please note that your general business insurance for calamities and hurricanes does not cover flood. So you need a special flood policy for that. If you lease your space, you can still get a flood policy for your contents. So that is the number one thing. And you want to get the lowest possible deductible that you can afford to pay every month, because when the disaster hits, cash is very scarce, and you need to have as much cash as possible, and that low deductible is going to make a huge difference. Also, how are you going to reach your employees after a disaster strike? Put all their names and numbers in the cloud and their email address so you can get to it and figure out how you're going to communicate with them. Again, do you have the inventory prior to the event? And actually this weekend, SBA and Visa sponsored a hackathon in DC to launch Small Business Week, and I was one of the judges, and it was on disaster preparedness. And the winning team created, it's so great, they created an app where you can take a picture, and then after the storm or whatever, you can take a picture, it'll note the damage, it'll go on the internet, find comparable products, price it, and then put it in a spreadsheet. And that's going to speed up getting repaid. Let's see, do you have your building measurements? That's going to speed things up. Do you have 3 months of cash in the bank? Because the most important thing we do as employers is pay our employees, and you're not going to be able to reopen without them. So you want to have as much cash in the bank as possible to, no pun intended, weather the storm. You can put everything else on your credit cards afterwards, but you have to pay your employees with cash in the bank. Do you have a line of credit or something that you can tap into for that long-term recovery? There's I look at things in two different ways. You have cash, which is that cash we use to pay our employees, and then you need money to actually recover, and that's that long-term, huge amount of money, which could be, well over $1 million. Do you have a restoration company already set up that you have a relationship with? I mean, I called my restoration company yesterday and put my name on the list already. Do you have relationships with all of your lawmakers, city, county, state, and federal? Because they work for us, and sometimes you need them. And so when I got the SBA disaster loan, we were approved, but I had to call my congressman's office to actually get the disbursement. And I knew them, and it was a very smooth transition to get the funds after I called them. So it doesn't matter what your politics, whether you agree with their politics or not, you just need to have the relationships. Know that FEMA does not help small businesses. They're not there to help small businesses, okay? FEMA's there for uninsured stuff, I don't know what the word is, uninsured damages in a municipality or for individuals. They do not help small business. You call the SBA for the disaster loan if it's federally declared or state declared. And you need, I think for right now, that's enough.
I'm just going to come back with three.
Stealing all my lines now.
No, I'm coming back with 3 practical things in your emergency: a screwdriver, a pair of pliers, and a crowbar. You'll be surprised how all 3 of those will become useful. So useful during an event.
All right, our next question is for Judge McDonald. As an individual, we already said it's very important to have an emergency kit for ourselves and for our family members. But why is it important to help invest in our employees' emergency kit?
Number one, having been a businessman for 30 years, my employees had to understand that they were valuable to me, and through a number of ways, most of them were monetary, but a lot of them, though, were familial things that we did, large company barbecues twice a year, quarterly and annual reward programs, bonus sharing programs, all those things. It's the same in government. Your employees, county employees, you need to understand that they're valuable. So then when you go in and you talk about an emergency that may affect them or their families, you've clearly enunciated their value to you personally as emergency management director, but to the county as a whole. So they need to feel valued. They need to understand that they have a huge value, not only to me, but to the county at large. It's also important that we prepare they and their families to evacuate. We've had to evacuate our county twice during my time. And in talking about and helping them to get their employee emergency kit ready, I always encourage them to have one at the courthouse or wherever their office may be and one at home. And if you have multiple homes, have them at all of them, because who knows where you're going to be when the day comes. But be prepared. Have those things ready. Have them ready to grab, and we call them go packs. Have a go pack wherever you may be at any given moment. And when you're helping them prepare, what you're also doing is preparing them to bounce back quicker. You're also helping them to be expecting that ask that the county judge is going to make. Okay, guys, you've got your family in a safe place. You've got them situated. You've got them monetized. The part about the dollars is very, very important. And you've got them everything they need. Now, you need to come on back to Matagorda County and help me to recover from this disaster, because I'm going to ask you. And that's the part about, I go back to my first statement, helping them to understand the value, because there's going to be an ask behind that. They are valuable. And it's going to be those folks who help us stand the county back up and help us recover. And so that's my view of the whole deal, is to help them understand their value and then make the very, very hard ask for them to come back and make it mandatory that they do. Because at the end of the day, again, I go back to my original statement to you all this morning. In my view, emergency management, preparedness, and recovery are the most important things that any county judge should be undertaking. And whoever said it this morning is absolutely right. If you hadn't had a disaster lately, just wait. It's coming. Texas is too darn big and too darn diverse not to have them. We're deluding ourselves if we think we aren't. It's going to happen. So be prepared. Be a good scout and be prepared.
So because our employees are our number one asset, we want them not only to be protected, but we want them to be able to come back to work so that we can get our business back up. Right. And then likewise, that helps the community, helps the county get back on their feet and get, as they say, onto the road to recovery. Yeah, absolutely. You have to set law enforcement and the courts and the clerk's offices and all those county services. There's just a huge amount of them, and you've got to have employees to do it. I can't do it myself. I can't come close. I don't have any grand delusions about that at all. I've got to have these good folks come back once they've gotten their families in a safe place, because that for me is the first concern. Just get your families in a good place. Tell me when you can come back, and let's stick to the plan that you've stated. I make them partners in the planning. I'm not a dictator kind of guy. I'm an old basketball player that comes from a team of 5 on the floor every time, and there's 7 more on the bench. And so there are 12 of us all the time working. So working with a commissioner's court of 5 is very, very easy for me. That's where I come from since I was 5 years old. So and I feel the same way today. At 63, you learn lessons. Why unlearn them? If it works, let's get after it. And that's what we do in our little county. I'll just step down at that and pass the mic.
Yeah, and I'll just add, it's preparedness is a mentality. So when you're doing, one of the things you can do for your employees is when you're doing these annual events and the award ceremonies and recognition, make preparedness a part of that discussion. When you're giving gift cards or investing in your employees, you can. You know, we always get those trinkets. Well, maybe you get a duffel bag that says, now here, fill it full of these things. So you can incorporate the idea of preparedness and do it along with them. Because, you know, one of the things from small business is those soft skills. You're constantly teaching your employees those soft skills. Well, critical thinking during disasters is very important, and you can use that as an opportunity.
So create a culture of preparedness.
Correct.
Just have money to pay your employees and be able to find them. That's probably the number one thing. And I just have to go back to the last question because I forgot something. Make sure you have all your financials current and in the cloud, along with any large contracts you might have, leases, articles of incorporation, because if you need a loan quickly, you're going to need those things, and you really don't have time to balance your checkbook for the past year. So you want to stay current and make sure it's at your fingertips.
All right. Well, we kind of briefly mentioned about preparedness and just, or not preparedness, but community preparedness. So, Mark, we know that being prepared can reduce fear, anxiety, and losses that accompany the disaster. We also know that every disaster starts and ends locally, and that each citizen plays an important role in this endeavor at the local level. So, what are some preparedness success stories you've seen in your communities?
Well, in the recent disasters, I mean, I've watched and have been here from Allison, Katrina, Rita, Dolly, Edward, Gustav, Ike, fires, plant explosions, chemical incidents, and each time we bounce back stronger. And I've watched communities that come together. And it's a saying that we say a lot is about neighbors helping neighbors. And, you know, on a blue sky day, what's mine is mine. But on a gray sky day, we share. And we come together and we work very hard to recover. And I've watched that in small neighborhoods. I've watched it in apartment complexes where the entire community came together and they're doing a barbecue. And they're helping each other survive. I've watched small business communities where they work to clean up the street, move the debris so that people could get access to the resources that they had in an emergency and a disaster. I've seen businesses bounce back very quickly because they were prepared. But unfortunately, I've seen a lot of businesses that didn't survive because they weren't prepared or they didn't believe that it could happen to me. It can. So through all of the events and the resilience that we show, we say, and we like to say, that we in Texas are better prepared than anywhere else in the country, that we can take care of ourselves. And we do that, and we've proven it. But we're continuing to grow, and we're growing at an incredible rate in this region with people coming here from other states, from Missouri. Welcome to Texas. And, you know, so there's an education process of how we do things here in the state of Texas, on how we work independently but collectively to get through that next event. I mentioned that we have a declared disaster on average every 9 months. We're good at this, but we all have to come together. We all have to understand our role and responsibilities to take care of ourselves, our family, our property, and as business owners, how do we get back on our feet quickly and effectively so that we can move on? So, you know, is there any one particular instance that I would say that stands out? No, because we've done it so often, and each time I'm in awe of how the community pulls together as quickly and as rapidly as it does, and working closely with all 34 of our cities, including the city of Houston, and you see the county judge and the mayor stand side by side in a unified message that we are going to work together to get through this. We want to see that continue, and hopefully we're not doing it Sunday morning, but it's going to happen again.
Thank you. Chief?
Well, one of the signs of success that I see is people taking all this seriously when we start talking about community preparation. We have something in Houston, Harris County called CERT, Community Emergency Response Team, and it's been in place for several years. We've trained over 34,000 people. We're up to 40? Okay. Got some updated numbers. Harris County just had a last-minute push here. So, so we're up to about 40,000 people trained in the region. And not only are they trained through our Homeland Security grant funding, we actually give them backpacks with different supplies out there. Everybody that attends the class, I think it's 6 two-hour training classes. We do them in both English and Spanish. The second thing that I think that I would consider assess is every year we hold it's called an Extreme Weather Expo. This year it's going to be Saturday, June 8th at the George R. Brown Convention Center downtown. We get 4,000 to 5,000 people out there. We provide a lot of the community preparedness information. They have some guest speakers, including who's the guy, the National Hurricane Director for the. I don't recall his name right now, but the National Hurricane Director will speak. The Harris County Judge will speak. The Mayor will speak, and then there's just different booths and information that we provide the citizens. So I really consider that a success. Originally it started out at 1,000, and 1,000 went to 2,000, 2,000 went to 4,000, and we're expecting 4,000 to 5,000 this weekend. And in every major event we have, including this rainfall, increases our attendance because people are paying attention and they want to figure out what they can do to help themselves.
And Chief, you bring up a good point about CERT, and that really is neighbors helping neighbors, because typically we try to get a CERT team formed in a particular neighborhood, and a lot of businesses find themselves in neighborhoods, so that might be a useful tool for business owners to leverage.
Absolutely. We have 254 teams in the county spread out across 1,777 square miles, and now over 40,000 individuals trained. We're the second largest program in the country. We have business CERT teams, we have faith-based organizational CERT teams, we have neighborhood teams, and members can be part of different teams. It depends on the disaster. So I can be part of my church team, I can be part of my neighborhood team, I can be part of my business team, because when that occurs is when they can react. And as Chief Buenik mentioned, it's a 24-hour class. It lasts 8 weeks. They're 3-hour sessions. They're held at night and on the weekends. And individuals, when they graduate, they're not SWAT, FBI, CIA, Secret Service. They're not firefighters. What they are is Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts for adults. They've learned things that they forgot of how to survive a disaster, taking care of themselves and their family. And we do it at community centers. We've done it at a variety of locations. I've got multiple trainers with the City of Houston to come out and provide that training. Each class is anywhere between 20 and 40 people, and they're from different parts of the community that come together. So we encourage you to encourage your employees to maybe get involved and do that. And I think it'll benefit them. It benefits your business. It's a group activity, and we've seen that on numerous occasions. We're also teaching it in the high schools. We're in 54 high schools, and we average about 4,000 to 6,000 high school students a year to go through the program.
And just to add to it, I actually took the class because, you always learn something. And you know what? You actually also learn a little bit more about your neighbors and learn who are your neighbors. So definitely look into it. It's a little shameless plug. So when a disaster does happen, and they do happen every day, depending on the severity of that disaster, a business can remain closed for many days. Lost revenue occurs, and lost wages for their employees. Having a plan to quickly resume operations is an essential requirement for a business owner. By just a quick show of hands, and please be honest, who knows or has what's called a Continuity of Operations Plan, also known as a COOP plan? That's okay. That's all right. George, in your words, can you explain why it's so important to have this plan for your organization?
Folks, we need some more hands up in the audience. Who has a COOP plan?
Don't be shy.
Yeah, we really need to work on that continuity of operations. Basically, what happens if you can't do business for that day? What happens if the power goes out? What happens if your business gets flooded? What do you do? What's your backup plan? I mean, that's really what it is. What's your backup plan? How can you operate from a remote site if you can't get to your main course of business? You know, do you have backup servers? Do you have laptops that you can, go to a remote location? The people that did raise their hand, including all the departments, City of Houston, everybody has a written plan in place. Everybody has a backup secondary, and some places have a third site location where if you can't work out of your main office, where do you work out of? You know, one of our backups is I'm going to be working out of Mark's office, right? We have a couple city locations, but worst gets to worst, and likewise, Harris County, they're more than welcome. But each business has to figure out, what they can do during Hurricane Harvey. What we found in our 911 center got overwhelmed. So one of the lessons learned is we needed more capacity. We need more capacity. We bought 20 extra, we call them ruggedized laptops, where we can sit in a parking lot and manage 911 calls for service. That's not our main backup. Our main backup's going to, we're going to do business out of Harris County 911 Center. We're going to do business out of Harris County Sheriff's Department. We're going to do business out of our North Houston Police Station. But everybody has to have a plan, a written plan. It's already been mentioned up here as part of the continuity plan. You need all your employees' telephone numbers. You need their email addresses. If you have multiple employees where you have supervisors, you need a phone tree because your employees are going to be looking at you to provide information. What do we do? Is the office open? Is it closed? And the business owner, him or herself, can't call everybody. So in my office, I have my managers and the people that report to them. It's their job. I'll develop the message, craft the message. Okay, here's what we're going to tell our employees, or the instructions that we're going to give our employees. And then the managers call the people that work underneath them, and we got to make sure that everybody is properly contacted and given the information.
Well, and also if you as the owner of the business are unavailable, maybe you got hurt, or maybe you're incapacitated, your employees are going to be looking for direction. If there's no continuity, what we call succession of command, who's making those decisions in your absence?
Good point. If I'm on vacation or unaware of something, my second in command takes over. If that person's not available, the person, the number 3 person. But yeah, you're absolutely right. But that's all written in our plans.
Mm-hmm.
And also, who signs checks if you're not there?
Exactly.
Right? Because we have to pay our employees. I think one of the things that we do right after the storm, and until Harvey, I don't think that we were able to verbalize it. We were doing it, but we weren't able to verbalize it. So there's kind of 4 divisions of labor. Number 1, we all work on finding the people and making sure their needs are handled and cared for, and that they can get, if we want them to come in, that they can get to work, or are they isolated somewhere? Do they need a car? We loaned one of our employees one of our cars for several months. So just make sure they're taken care of. And again, the money thing, all right? I cannot stress enough the money. If you don't have money, there's no reason to muck out your business. You might as well just shut your doors, because you won't survive without money. And then you need to look at all your assets, see what's salvageable. And then the ones that aren't salvageable, you need to figure out how are you going to replace them, or how are you going to fix them. And the same with vehicles. And generally, we're having to go out of town to get that stuff, because you don't want to you don't know if your vehicle in Houston area has been flooded or has any kind of damage. You're really not sure of that. So we tend to go out of town for those things. The same with, in our case, motors and other baking equipment. And then we have someone that handles the cleanup and return to operations. And they'll manage all of our team. We'll get as many team members in to work with the restoration company. Also, one thing I failed to say in regards to being prepared, and I haven't done this yet, but one thing I learned from Harvey you need to know where you're getting a dumpster. That was one of the hardest things for us because you cannot clean up without a dumpster. And it took us 2 weeks to get one. And then you have to figure out how quickly can you get it emptied and brought back. That was like another week wait. So it really slowed us down, the whole dumpster thing. So I would recommend figuring that out, y'all.
So Janice, if I may, it sounds like a lot of the things that you're bringing up would be something that would be maybe in a business emergency plan?
Yeah, I guess I have one, but I don't call it that, the continuity of operations plan, because that's just too big for us. That would be overwhelming. So yeah, I mean, that's in our plan, you know, and and every disaster we add something to it. So like the dumpster thing, I'm adding that this year.
So it doesn't stay on the shelf, collect dust. You don't look at it maybe once every few years, but
it'd be good to write all this down, right?
Yeah. So it's something that you look at regularly and see if it's still applicable.
And in March, April, actually kind of evaluate our finances to figure out if something happens, how are we going to get that money? Where's that money coming from? Because I know that's a few $100,000 that we'll need pretty immediately. And just to give you an idea, how many of y'all's businesses flooded or have been hit by disasters also? Oh, that's good. Not many, but you would know. We paid our employees, and then we put everything else on credit cards that we could. Our October, the storm came August 25th. Our October 6th credit card bill was $100,000, and our November 6th credit card bill was $141,000. So in the span of 30 days, we had to pay basically $250,000. But I was able to postpone it at least, right? Because I put it on charge cards. So that's the kind of money that you're looking at for any kind of major disaster that physically impacts your business. And that's why I start to evaluate in March and April, where am I going to get a few $100,000?
So the only follow-up question, where did you go with all those airline miles?
We do cashback cards, y'all. You can pay for your own airplane tickets.
So I feel like I'm in disclosure mode, but I'm not your typical city administrator because in Missouri I own a bunch of rental properties, and I actually am a minority owner in a tax preparedness company in Montana that's a national brand. So I understand some aspects of the small business component. So what I would tell you is, you think, well, that's, a continuity plan is sort of part of the government, right? So I run a day-to-day corporation that has 100 employees, that has a service area of about 10 miles. I have around 20,000 customers, and my operating revenue is $17 million. So how close did I describe some of your guys' business? So if I said, I don't have a plan when a disaster hits, I no longer am going to be the CEO of that company. So I would go back to you guys, and you're never too small. We talk about Harris County and Houston and all of their stuff, but no matter how small you are, whether you're a small county, small city, or the big guys, a plan in any form, written, reviewed, and understood, is going to be helpful in a disaster.
That said, understand that it's got to be malleable, because when a disaster comes, no two are alike. There's no cookie cutter approach to them, and you've got to be adaptable, and you've got to be willing to think outside the box, and you've darn sure got to be ready to take counsel, because if you think you're the only guy in the room with a good idea, you're disillusioned, is what I'll say. I'm just fortunate to have married a really strong Czech gal that has all the ideas in my home, so I've learned for 36 years how to take instruction and how to get good ideas, and I don't have to have them because she's got about 98% of them, and the other 2% she suggested. So I really have no original thoughts in my home. That carries over to the office, and I get a lot of things done because I surround myself with people and I listen to all of them. If you're talking, you're probably not listening, you're probably not learning, and so I tend to listen a lot, and then I'll mediate or moderate or facilitate the discussion that I'm in, and help us to all as a team take on the best idea and then push it forward, whether it's in recovery, preparedness, whatever it may be. That's just my approach. So I think enough said.
Thanks, sir. All right, we're going to now transition into response and discuss some things that typically take place right before and during the disaster. Mark, some disasters can have long to moderate lead times where public officials are closely monitoring the changing weather conditions. Oftentimes, though, disasters happen at a moment's notice and will require employees to leave the workplace quickly. The ability to evacuate workers, customers, and visitors effectively can save lives. Where can a business owner go to learn about the evacuation process and general timelines of an evacuation? And are all evacuations and their corresponding timelines equal?
No. All right, so if evacuation is ordered, let's start with hurricanes. There is on HGAC's website, on your local emergency management website, we'll have evacuation zones. And during hurricanes, evacuations are going to take place right there. There you go. Based on surge. We run from water, hide from the wind. And it's by zip codes. And local elected officials, your mayor and county judge can call for an evacuation. In state law, the only elected official that trumps a local mayor in evacuation is the county judge. They can supersede a mayor and order evacuation during a hurricane of that community. And in that event, you can go to the website and you can see whether or not your business, your home, is in an evacuation zone for hurricanes. If we're talking about, and usually when we post, we'll go through the Joint Information Center. Your local jurisdictions will post what areas they're asking for voluntary or mandatory evacuation. If we're talking about another hazard, let's say that we are dealing with a chemical incident, and we ask for a shelter in place or an evacuation, that's done by typically the incident commander that's on scene, coordinating with their emergency management agency, that we will then put out to the media that we are requesting a certain geographical area to be evacuated. In many cases, that is going to be distributed by local law enforcement, fire, and first responders that are in the field to help get that information to those people in that specific geographical footprint as quickly and effectively as possible. We can do emergency alerting through your phone systems. Anybody get a flood alert last night? Did the phone go beep, 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 beep? Okay? Or you see it scroll across the screen, you know, this is the National Weather Service, please run and hide. And unfortunately, it happens very often here, and your millennials, okay, I haven't figured it out yet, have figured out a way to turn that off so they don't get alerts. And they don't want them because they're not what I want to see on my phone. And when they do that, they put themselves at risk. So when we do an EAS, an emergency alert broadcast, through the National Weather Service or through the FCC, there's a reason for it. And we can geocode an area, and there's early warning systems, there's reverse 911. How many of you still have landlines at your home? Okay, that is dwindling in a great rate, and everybody's going cellular. And we're working with the FCC so we can alert that. So by going through your local emergency management office, you should be able to understand evacuations for storm-related events and what those areas are. But when we talk about evacuation due to other hazards, all right, that's going to be an immediate notification that'll come out from that local emergency management and the incident commander in the field.
Judge McDonald, since you have had, I'm sure, a number of opportunities to order an evacuation, can you provide some lessons learned or on those evacuations that you have enacted and how to help a small business during that evacuation?
Yeah. How can a business owner find out if there are areas within jurisdiction? We're talking about owners finding out about the jurisdictions being evacuated.
Not only that, but how can they better plan during the evacuation and other tools that can help themselves during the evacuation?
That's a great question. I was prepared to answer and tell you where they could go to find out. You know, certainly the Joint Information
Mark took your
Center.
thunder.
I'm sorry?
Mark stole some of your thunder.
Yeah, no, he did very well, and he's absolutely right. But I like the question about who still has a landline. You know, guys, if you think these things are going to work all the time, again, they're not. They're not. There comes a time where you're going to need a satellite phone. There's going to come a time where I hope you have a car charger for these things, because you're not going to have electricity in your home. You may or may not have a generator, so you better have one of those little 12-volt car charger things if you're going to use this. But the business community in our county, again, I'm rural. We have 36,702 people in our county. They can come directly to the county judge. Half of those folks probably have my cell phone. The county gives me a cell phone, so by God, I publish it. You know, if you want to contact me, do. Our emergency management coordinator is just as reachable, and her staff's the same way, as are all the commissioners and the sheriff and his very large staff. So, you know, you go right to the horse's mouth, so to speak, to understand what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And we're going to use all means necessary now. We're not going to abandon these just because I'm not a millennial. We're going to use them. And we did 30 or 40 Facebook Live broadcasts during Harvey, because we found that was the best way to get out. A lot of folks didn't have television. A lot of folks had a lot of things wavering. A lot of roads were underwater, so we couldn't do route alerting like we typically do, going house to house and getting people out of harm's way. So we used what we had to. So you use all means necessary to get out and get folks made aware of what's going on, in my view.
And that's actually a great lead-in for my next question. So, Chris, with today's technology, we're always being bombarded with various alerts, notifications, whether that's on our smartphone devices, television, or radio. In an era of constant information, there's a fear that we may desensitize people for when a disaster is pending or occurring. So as a small business owner, what communication should I monitor, and what notification should I take seriously during a pending or active evacuation?
One, establish those relationships with leadership in your community before a disaster. So then you can go straight to the horse's mouth, or you're following an account that you know is going to on social media that is going to have valid information. The one thing I put in my notes is that you follow leadership when you're not in crisis mode. Have multiple monitors monitoring multiple social medias, so that you can sort of look through the triage and find a thread that makes sense, and where you can validate that. And then in terms of the next step of communication, I think that small business owners would do very well to sort of communicate succinctly to their employees, HR, or anyone that's really dealing with depending on the size of the business, that has that direct communication link to the employees. Speak with one voice. So I would say monitor multiple social media outlets with multiple people, so that you can, as a business owner, sort of figure out where you think the truth lies, because there is a lot of stuff and a lot of data points to process during any a disaster, and you're going to make judgment calls as it is. So the more data that you have to make those decisions, I think you should do. But then when you make those decisions, do it very succinctly and one unified voice.
And I'd just like to add, in terms of water level, the Harris County Flood Control District, I think, they have these flood gauges. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it. And so last night we were watching the flood gauge by the bakery to see how high the water was getting. And then when it started going back down, we went to bed. So we could rest a little easier until y'all woke us up. So, and then the other thing was the Facebook groups that are in your area, your geographic area, that are reliable. We have a lot of flood Facebook groups now, and so they keep an eye on the area, and those are really, I think, good places to watch as well.
Okay. Chief Buenik, one of the best methods of assuring a company can recover from a disaster is having a communications plan that details how the organization plans to communicate with its employees, local authorities, customers, and others during and after a disaster. What kind of information should the communications plans specifically address? And should a business also communicate with local authorities on what emergency assistance is needed for their continued essential business activity?
We talked a little bit about the communication plan and internally about the the phone trees and having all the employee information and sending out a message. She just touched on social media. She was saying Facebook, different Facebook groups for floods. There's Nextdoor. Who's on Nextdoor? Nextdoor, yeah. I'm on that too. Great website for local community to stay involved. And Nextdoor, they have businesses and residents on there. So it's a great communication tool. The city and the county, we're going to use social media, sending out Twitter. Please. I was never a big Twitter guy, I'll be honest with you. I still have not tweeted. I don't know how my kids do, and they're very proficient on there. But I use that to obtain information and obtain good information. See if Houston Office of Emergency Management, Harris County Office of Emergency Management, both use Twitter to send out communication and email. We do Facebook. I'm not a big Facebook person, but if you are, I think they also do some Instagram communications. But due to technology, I'm telling you where to get the best source of information. That's your local news. At one point, the public safety officials had all the information, and we would make announcements and distribute it to the news. The news has a lot more resources than us. They send reporters out in the field. Their video, they're sending live stream video for several hours yesterday into the high water area, showing people stranded. At this point, the city doesn't have that capability to push that message out to the public. So we actually work really close with our local media, but also when we're in our emergency operations center, just like Mark does, we have all the news stations on. We're looking at Channel 13, 2, 26, 11, and national news to get our best sources of information.
We have a point of sale system, and I noticed one of the apps on the point of sale system, it looks like we can push out a message to everybody. So if you have something like that, you might want to look at some of the apps that might allow you to message all of your team through that system as well.
So Janice, I got unless...
Well, on the City of Dickinson, we have on our website, you can do RSS feed, but most governments have opt-in systems, so you're going to need to opt in prior to when you need to opt in. So that would be my only statement.
So Janice, I got next questions for you. So immediately following a disaster, a local community can face degradation of any number of basic services such as internet connectivity, electricity, or even the routes to and from the place of business due to downed trees, electrical wires. You talked a lot about having cash on hand and being a cash-based business. What other important things, generators, supply chain management, other things that a small business should be concentrating on?
And it's a four-part thing: people, money, assets, cleanup, return to operations. And that return to operations, one thing with Harvey that I didn't think about was our suppliers. And our suppliers had to get resupplied, and then they had to be able to get into town, because some of our suppliers are out of town. And they had to be able to get in town to bring us our flour and sugar and things of that nature. And so we actually got business interruption. We were probably one of the few that got business interruption with Harvey, and it was because I had read my policy, by the way, and we had overhead wireline failure, which was considered a covered cause of loss, and I got business interruption for 6 days for all of my team, so that was very helpful. So they wanted me off the business interruption, and I said, listen, my suppliers can't even get here. And so another part of that story is our community's infrastructure and thinking about mitigation. And I don't know if we're going to get into that or not, so I won't go.
we will.
Okay, I'll take the mic back when we do that. But anyway, so you just have to look at your suppliers. And HEB brought in 1,000 people to restock all their shelves, okay? Most of us can't do something like that. And I even talked to the HEB manager that I go to, and he says it'll be 6 weeks before we're back up to where we were. And so as a small business, it was longer than 6 weeks. And I mean, some of the things that you need, you just can't get. We had a mixer that we ordered. It took 9 months to get it. So you have to come up with the plan of Band-Aiding your mixer until you get the new mixer. So things like that.
One thing to consider is that we do not have to be the jurisdiction that's impacted for you to be impacted. How many of you look at outside suppliers as we're talking about supply chain and redundancy? If your sole supplier of a product comes from another state and they're impacted, how does that affect you? We supply a large portion of the United States fuel. We supply jet fuel into LaGuardia and to Detroit. And during Ike, we shut those pipelines down. North Carolina, Virginia's fuel supply, they were rationing fuel. They weren't impacted. So you got to understand what your supply chain is, and when you look at your continuity of operations, it doesn't have to happen here. Your business could be impacted because of something that happens in California, Puerto Rico, somewhere else in the world where you get those raw materials or the resources you need to do your everyday business. So you need redundancy and that capability to find additional suppliers. And unfortunately, in Puerto Rico, there's a sole supplier of a medical product. And if you're in the medical field, that sole supplier to the United States was destroyed. And we had a huge problem in our medical industry until we could get that plant back up and operational. So if you're sole sourced, your livelihood doesn't rest on whether or not you can open your doors. It's whether or not they can open theirs.
So once the disaster clears and things calm down, we now transition to recovery. Judge McDonald, following a disaster, one of the first questions the evacuated population may ask is when they can return to their homes, or is it safe to return? For a business owner, when will they know when it's safe to return and open up their business? And how is that normally communicated?
Yeah, we have a 3-tiered reentry system in Matagorda County. We have a sticker system. And so we sent letters out just last week, about 500 of them, to our industries, to our business people, to our ranches, to our farms. The first folks that are going to come in are with a red sticker that we issue from my office. And we have to have driver's licenses and names, and we have criminal background checks on folks. We don't want criminals coming back in first. So if you've got some, don't send a request for them, because the DA's office, the DA inspector's right next to my office. They're going to catch that, because I send the list over to them. She runs them. And then we go in and issue the red stickers. The red stickers are for assessment personnel. They're for folks to come in and assess damages and assess hazards and mitigate them. And if they need additional folks, well then, we'll clear those. I'll typically clear those out of the EOC. We have their driver's licenses so they can get through the blockades. Oftentimes we have evacuations and we have the roads closed down. We did during Harvey, we did during Ike, and you need to come back through the sheriff's office or back through the DPS blockades, and they all have those lists, and if you're on it, well, you get in. If you don't, you don't get in. You may call me, and there may be a need to get you in, and I may or may not let you, but that'll be my call. Then the second group of folks are the green stickered folks that come in. These are the critical personnel that we need to stand back up services such as hospital, pharmacies, grocery stores, Walmarts, fuel stations, those sorts of things, so that we can be prepared to allow a general reentry. Once I'm satisfied and my team's satisfied that we have all those pieces in place, then and only then will we order a general reentry for the entire populace to come back in. And when we do that, we use everything available to us. We use all the media outlets, and we have 2 radio stations in our county that we use. They're under contract to supply this kind of broadcasting for us. And then we have one in Wharton County as well, in El Campo, that we use. We also use Facebook Live, again, I'll go on and say, okay, guys, time to come back. Please be aware of these hazards, this hazard, that hazard. We don't have electricity in this part of the county. We have Jackson Electric and AEP crews up working diligently to get it. On the other hand, Palacios, you're 100%. Come on back in. You know, the Lowe's grocery store is open. All your fuel outlets are open and inventoried. You know, so all those things are what we use. We use everything available to us, including the sheriff's office going out into the countryside and helping spread the word. If you can spread the word to some of the folks who didn't evacuate, as we know, not everyone heeds your order of evacuation. And so if you can go out and spread that word, well, they're going to spread the word to their neighbors, friends, and family, and they're going to help you do that. So don't underestimate the value of using your folks that were left behind, or the folks who chose to stay behind, in helping spread the word, because they will.
Sure.
And it happens fairly quickly after that.
And Chris, following a major disaster, the state may become eligible for certain federal assistance or for individual homeowners and governmental organizations, certain private and nonprofit organizations. What are some of the important things to know about federal assistance following a disaster, especially as it pertains to a small business?
You want to definitely document your pre-disaster condition. You know, one of the things, and this goes for local government or small business, is, you know, FEMA's and SBA's purpose and FEMA on the individual assistance, so that's for your families. They want to get you back to pre-disaster conditions. And as we all have been, there's lots of disasters and they're constantly happening. So you're just the newest and greatest disaster. So one of the things is, if you can truly document and do those assessments prior to an event on an annual basis, so that when any federal funding is available, and to include insurance, you can show exactly your existing condition. So, and I cannot stress enough, document, document, document. The other advice I'll give you, and I'm kind of correcting this issue in Dickinson now, is think of everyone that speaks to you with federal and state funding as an attorney. Only answer the question they're asking. So, because you never know when you may disqualify yourself for something. So that is what you say and how you say it will determine some of the, because there's a lot of federal regulations that are really subject to determination. And I just cannot underscore enough, be very mindful of what you're saying, how you're saying it, and when you're saying it.
Just in response to what Chris said, also, when you call in your claims, have a wind event is better than a flood, okay? Because your business interruption is going to kick in if you have it, which I hope you do. As small business owners here in Texas, there are no resources. And we have y'all, but there are no financial resources. You have FEMA for individual homeowners. FEMA helps the municipalities, nonprofits. But when you heard Shaun's list, FEMA does not help small businesses. We are dependent on ourselves and making good, sound choices prior to the event. And this is where y'all really can help. Our state officials and our federal officials need to hear our voices. We need an emergency bridge fund that will be activated during an emergency like the state of Florida has. And that will help get some quick cash into the hands of small business owners. And that's going to take all of us talking to our lawmakers in Austin to make that happen. NFIP, you cannot use any of those funds to pay your employees, nor can you use any of the funds from your SBA disaster loan to pay your employees. So maybe that would be a nice change if we could use some of that early money that we get from NFIP to pay our employees, and then you can backfill it once you're back up and running. Additionally, SBA and NFIP, those funds get you back to where you were the day before. You cannot move using those funds. So that's another change that probably we need to look at. And the other thing is there's a 6-to-1 return on investment in any money we spend on mitigation. So we were just up in D.C. We went and spoke to Texas lawmakers with the people from the Pew Charitable Trust Flood Prepared Communities group, and we're advocating that perhaps these businesses that have flooded over and over and over again, maybe you take the amount of money that they've been paid, multiply it times 3, and say, here's a bucket of money. And you can use that toward a move. And then on that 4th flood, the government's making money. You can't get a better return on investment than flood insurance. You pay $30,000 a year and you get $1 million. I mean, you can't get a better return, but I'd rather not have that. I'd rather be higher ground. And anyone who's been affected by any of these disasters, you're in a financially devastated community, so your revenue stream is going down. And our lawmakers need to understand that. And so I would encourage you, if anybody's interested, I'm certainly here to talk to you and help you through that, but they need to hear our voices. We're a forgotten segment, small business.
Thank you, Janice.
I just want to add, part of that is stay calm when you're in that moment of trying to make some of those decisions, because knowing your policy and understanding how to maximize the benefit that you need, because while wind may give you interruption of business, intrusion or water intrusion by wind may give you interruptive business, it won't cover contents but from the flooding aspect, because it came in that way. So there's just different ways that you have to look at your policy and understand how it's going to be applied and what's going to be best for you for the overall recovery.
To Janice's point, she's right. I had a lot of small businesses harmed in my county from Hurricane Harvey. A chief among those, I think, were my agribusinessmen. I have one of the largest agriculture economies in the state of Texas, and it's very, very diverse. We have everything from aquaculture to row crops to irrigated agriculture to wild-caught seafood, wild-caught wild animals, all kind of things. And nevertheless, what we had was a disaster with our cotton farmers particularly. They had cotton harvested in the fields, and then the floods came and trapped them in the fields, and it sat there and rotted. So what they had, many of them had multi-million-dollar loans in place that now they couldn't service because their amortizable dollars were sitting in the fields rotting, and I needed some bridge financing. Well, the governor made a good choice to stand up what's called Rebuild Texas. The day he announced that in Fort Bend County, I was there along with 3 other county judges and 8 or 10 mayors. And the governor also had Chancellor Sharp there and Chief Kidd, and Lieutenant Governor was there. There were a number of top state officials there. And he made the mistake, or he made the good decision, to let the press go out of the room and have and let us have a conversation with them, the elected officials. And in so doing, I'd been writing down my questions the whole time. Apparently nobody else was. He asked if there were any questions. I was kind of waiting. I didn't want to be the first, but nobody asked any questions, so I did. And finally, he just relented and gave us his cell phone, and then he instructed, he had just announced Chancellor Sharp as the commissioner for Rebuild Texas, and he said, Commissioner, he said, Judge McDonald needs your cell phone. He said, matter of fact, all of y'all can have it. So they gave us our cell phones. They gave us their cell phones. And it's important not to abuse that privilege, but it's important for your elected officials to use that privilege when you need it. We needed it to go in and find some bridge financing, because you're right, I couldn't get any financing for my ag producers who had tens of millions of dollars of product out there and were about to fail. Some of them were 50, 60-year practitioners of their craft. What we found was that through Rebuild Texas and Chancellor Sharp and his connections, he's been in politics a very long time. He's a very, very good public servant. He was able to find some bridge financing for my ag producers. 2 banks in the state of Texas agreed to mimic SBA 0% financing for up to 9 months. That's all I needed, was a bridge to get my guys out of the ditch, so to speak, and it worked. So I had 8 or 10 of them use that, and but you got to have your elected officials make those calls. You got to have them present at the meetings. You know, if you know your elected officials, by God, encourage them to get their butts up here to Houston or Fort Bend County, or wherever you need to be in those meetings and to have discourse with the higher elected officials. Those are the guys that are going to be able to help you. And in our instance, at least, it did help. And I'm not saying it can help in every venue, but it's certainly worth a try. And I just encourage you to take advantage of that.
Thanks, sir. Chief Buenik, after a disaster, one of the unfortunate side effects of the disaster is the increase in opportunistic crime. For a business owner, this tends to translate into looting. What should a business owner do if they are confronted with looting? And what are some of the things that a business owner can do before disaster to protect their property?
Well, look, I guess the one thing that I would say that I would not encourage is, self-defense of the looters. I know we've seen that in some of the other country or some of the other large cities that experience some major disasters. We do not certainly encourage, and when I say we, from the law enforcement perspective side, we don't encourage homeowners or business owners to actively protect their own property. We do have law enforcement folks available. I know the city of Houston, on some of the major hurricanes, Ike and then during Harvey, multiple law enforcement agencies came in from other cities and sometimes from across the country to provide assistance. We just prefer that law enforcement handle the looters.
Okay. So we're going to switch gears to mitigation. We're getting close to our time, and I want to make sure we have an opportunity for the audience to ask some questions. So I just got just a couple quick more questions about mitigation. Janice, the first one's going to be for you. The best way to become resilient within your community and strengthen your business is through mitigation. So once we leave this forum today, what are some of the first things? We spoke about reading your insurance policy, but what are some of the other things that business owners should do leaving today in order to mitigate against the future?
Really reading your insurance policy. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm a broken record, but and making sure you have all different types of coverage. And I'll give you an example with Ike. We were getting insurance somewhere else, and they were getting ready to cancel us. So we went and we moved to an agency. My husband was doing it direct. And we went with an agency, and we walked in, and we said, we want to have the kind of insurance that if, God forbid, we had a fire, we could rebuild, pay our employees, reopen, and everything will be taken care of for 12 months. And then you close your eyes and hope they did that, because I didn't read the policy, right? I didn't read it until after we got hit by the hurricane. And one of the things they put in there was sign insurance, all right? We have this huge sign at the bakery that's been there since 1960, and the sign actually went like this, and it cost $7,500 just to straighten it, and it would have cost $40,000 to take it down, but we had the insurance to fix it in a very low deductible. These are things that you don't think about, right? Getting an ultra policy. The ultra policy pays for, we needed a mobile home to work out of for 9 months with Ike, and it paid for 2 of them. It paid our employees past the normal 4 months of business interruption and would cover it up to 12 months of business interruption, paying our employees. We were able to get ordinance of law coverage. So normally in your general business policy, you have about $10,000 for code compliance, which is like, in our case, a hand washing sink, things of that nature, FRP on the walls in the production area. Well, we had $150,000 for ordinance of law, and it wasn't even enough, all right? But our insurance agent took care of us. So with Hurricane Ike, we were actually only out $50,000 because we had a really good insurance policy. So that is the number one thing I would tell you to do when you leave here today is go read your insurance policy. It is better than sleeping pills, all right? But it's going to make or break whether you survive or not.
So speaking of insurance policies, and Mark, this question's for you. Whether you're a tenant or the building owner, a flood can devastate your business. So according to the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, more than 25% of businesses that close due to a devastating event, such as a flood, never reopen. So why is a flood insurance so important, and what does it actually cover? And if I have one, is it one and done? Do I need to renew it annually?
Well, yes, you like any insurance policy, you want to make sure you have an active coverage. So, I mean, obviously it's covering for the impacts to you due to a flood. And that's a separate policy, as we've talked about under NFIP. It's critical that, that as homeowners, as business owners, that you have coverage. I mean, we have emphasized insurance, cash, insurance numerous times, that if you don't, you won't be back. You are not going to be in business. It's just unfortunately, I mean, SBA has probably mentioned it, and you're well aware that a lot of small businesses without capital, cash, and in coverage close in less than 72 hours after a catastrophic event. They're not going to reopen. There's just no way. So insurance is crucial. So under the flood insurance program, and there's people that live in a state of acceptance and those that live in a state of denial. And many of you didn't raise your hand that you flooded or have never flooded. It can happen. And that's what insurance is about, is that protection in order to sustain what you've built. I mean, you're all proud of the businesses that you own, operate, and have. So protect it, and you need to be able to do that. And that's critical to our success as a community. You employ residents of our communities, and that's the lifeblood. We talked about, whether or not we're going to allow you to be back in. We want businesses back open as fast as we've asked you to shut down for the protection of residents. Life safety is our #1 priority. But we also know the lifeblood is the sales revenues and the work that you do in small businesses. We've got to get our community back to work, get our schools back open, along with many other things. When we talk about and I'm going to go back to mitigation really quickly. We talked about insurance as being part of that plan, but you got to walk your property. Understand where you operate. Where do you store your documents? Is there a redundancy in that? Do you take all of your papers that you get and all your sales receipts and take them down to a storage location next to the bayou? You got to have it backed up somewhere, and mitigating that may be, instead of putting it on the bottom shelf, I'm keeping it on the top shelf. It might be that you have only one backup on your networks, and I use that. Do I have redundancy in case something happens, and can I gain access to those things? When you look at mitigating, it's walking your property and you have a dead tree on your neighbor's yard, on your neighbor's property, next to the power line that supplies you your power, and the next windstorm it falls over. It's about partnerships and saying, hey, can we get that tree removed? That's mitigating a potential risk and a threat. It's a simple thing. So, when you look at mitigation, it's insurance and capability of getting yourself back up and operational, but it's mitigating that risk and threat and how close you are to the proximity of those risks and threats. And the risks and threats go well beyond flooding. They go well beyond wind and other things. You got to understand where you are in your community and those risk and threat assessments.
So speaking of mitigation and mitigation planning, one of the things that a county does is they do mitigation planning. So Judge McDonald, why should a business owner review, or why should they even care about a county's mitigation plan, and where would they go to find that information?
That's a great question. My belief is they have to understand what potential hazards exist out there so they can plan for them, plan to mitigate them. And in order to do that, plan to mitigate them so they can carry out their business plan. They should have a business plan that's contingent upon all these hazards. You need to clearly understand them. And I want to go back just a little bit to the question before, why is flood insurance important? And it is, especially from a flood-prone area. And you make a good point. We're all flood-prone. We all live on the coastal plains down here. But there are places that have better elevation and better drainage byways and highways than others. Matagorda County is one of those. But I was in the infrastructure build business for 30 years, and I always told folks, they say, before we'd be building a pad for a home or for a mall or for whatever it may be, Nate, how high should I build this thing? I said, well, get to what the county requires and then go about 4 or 5 feet. Elevation is the best flood insurance you can get. Now, can you afford it? Yeah, probably, if you look at it long term. But go ahead and elevate your building, especially if you're in a green build. Get that done right up front. That's the best thing that you can possibly do. The mitigation plan's available in my office. It's available in each of our commissioners' office. As you all probably know, each county in the state of Texas has 4 county commissioners. Each of them should have the mitigation plan in their office, and our emergency management coordinator's office as well. And then it's online and all those other good places that you normally look for things. But the key is for elected officials to be available, have their ears open, and be ready to answer questions and produce what's needed for each of their constituents when they ask, especially their business folks, because their business folks, frankly, are standing up and supporting and moving forward each of our county's economies. Without business folks, you're a dying community, dying community.
Mark,
So
can you follow up with that?
I have a healthy respect for them.
One thing that, and I'm waiting for the mic, that it's crucial that jurisdictions have a mitigation plan. It isn't that it's going to be help you immediately. In Harris County, and having a FEMA-approved mitigation plan means that we can receive federal funding that helps support Harris County Flood Control District to deepen, widen, and deal with flood control projects. If we do not have an approved FEMA mitigation plan, we're not eligible for funding. And that is crucial to a jurisdiction. So cities, counties in Texas should have an approved mitigation plan because that indirectly helps you in terms of infrastructure and making sure that you don't become a casualty of the lack of mitigating from a local government's perspective of widening or deepening a bayou or doing other mitigative projects that help support our infrastructure from transportation and other issues. So there are jurisdictions that don't have mitigation plans. We have 39 jurisdictions that are a signature to Harris County's mitigation plan that make them eligible for those funds that indirectly support our communities and their resilience towards the risks and the threats that we have.
So that concludes at least the formal set of questions for our panelists. So now let's dive into some audience questions for our panelists. What I would ask, though, is wait for the microphone to get to you. State your name, where you are from, if you're an owner of a small business or part of a larger organization, and then let's get to your questions. So right up here.
Hello, my name is Barbara Reef, and I'm a SCORE mentor. I have a question. Number one, what is the recourse and support that we can expect from the county and the city when they are more concerned about force majeure, and that is acts of God like Harvey, versus man-made disasters that occurred in the energy corridor when they opened up the gates, okay? What are the recourses? And the second question I have, and then I'll stop, what is the responsibilities of businesses who have a fiduciary responsibility to their customers to, when they're flooded, to be able to open up for business so that they can retrieve their papers that they've kept off-site? For example, Bank of America in the energy corridor didn't open up for, I'm going to say, 7-8 weeks for people and to go into their safety deposit boxes. The response from the Bank of America, and this destroyed a lot of businesses because they couldn't retrieve their papers that were off-site, was we have no responsibility to the customer if your box got flooded. How, and we could not, in the energy corridor, find an area of the city to go to censure Bank of America with their callous approach.
Okay. Who would like to head up that question?
I can tell you what.
I'm not in the energy corridor, I'll answer that.
And when we do ask our questions, let's be respectful to the entire audience, as we want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to ask a question.
And I will tell you, and from I'll continue with the callous conversation. You know, we have a responsibility as an appointed official to do what's in the best interest of the public as a whole. I can promise you every decision I make at any given time is going to have a winner and a loser. And I just hope at the end of the day, I've picked more winners than losers. But the reality of the situation is, and that's why when you get down to it, and this happens not only on the private sector, but the public sector, is you have to be responsible for yourself. You need to be self-contained. I can tell you in Dickinson, if I have a problem, if I attempt to go to the county, they're going to prioritize me with the other communities in that county on what resources I'm going to get. And when the county goes to the state, they're going to prioritize. And when the state goes to the federal, they're going to prioritize. So those winners and losers are being selected in every given decision point. So that's why the one thing I would tell you to take away from here is be self-contained and do it on your own. And that's why it's the backup, because one of my mantras that I live by is it only matters when it matters. And so if you profess to that, you will decide every decision prior to an event, does this matter or will it matter? And if the answer is yes, then you need to take corrective action.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Self-sufficiency is huge. Unfortunately, we're all human beings in this room and all over our country and the world. And no two human beings are created with the amount of self-sufficiency. Now, some are on that very, very high plane. I happen to be one of those. I do just fine 200 years ago. But I live out in the country, and by God, that's how we do it. In the city, you guys are a little more dependent on other folks for everything, it seems like. You're just not as self-sufficient. It is what it is. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way it is. There's so many of you, and you have so little assets and so little patch of ground to live on. Well, you have to be sufficient. You have to plan with your neighbor and with your employer and with all these other folks. What I say all that to say that your elected officials should be advocating for you. They should be advocating for you fiercely with every asset that they have, and the longer they've been in office, they should have more assets. I think I mentioned at the onset I'm now in my 4th term. I can dial Governor Abbott right here, and either he'll pick up or text me back in 30 seconds. That's an asset that I use only when I need it now. But if you're a business owner, if you're a person or group of persons that can't get into a bank, we're going to talk to the governor about that, and the governor's going to talk to the president about that, and before you know it, Bank of America is going to come to heel, and you're going to get in there and get your papers out of there. And it's going to be well before 6 or 8 weeks, or certainly 6 or 7 months. And that's the way that should work. Your elected officials should be doing their constituents' bidding. We work for you, clearly. I was in business for myself. I had no bosses for 30 years. I went to work for the county and instantly had 36,702 of them. Instantly. And I accept that. That's okay. I'm there to build a county, and I need all of them to come along with me to do that. So that goes both ways. They need me, but I need them even more. So I work for them, and that's the way I would say. I say your county judge or your mayor, they should be listening and bringing all their assets to bear.
Do we have another question in the audience? I see in the back.
When you mentioned about elevation is the best insurance, I'm curious about if Three Brothers considered raising their store since you were flooded so many times. And we missed you all those times you were down, believe me.
That's so sweet. Thank you. We really can't raise our store because we would have to be closed for so long that we'd be out of business. And so the only real solution for us is we probably will have to move. We'll split our production, send that to some cheaper real estate, and then we'll move the store somewhere in the neighborhood. But we really appreciate your support. And without y'all, we wouldn't have made it to 70 years, so thank you.
Again, I've got some real estate if you want to look for a production company. So I'll sell you some land on the bayou.
Okay. We have just under 5 minutes left. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What are some practical applications that we can advise the people we counsel where to store their documents? Hacking is going on the internet and the cloud. Banks get flooded or affected by natural disaster. Any suggestions for practical applications?
I mean, really, it needs to be in the cloud because you don't know where you're going to be. And you need to have them at your fingertips, especially if you're trying to get a loan. You need to have all those documents. They don't require the original. You need to have all those documents about your business in the cloud. And, you know, the hackers already have our stuff. So really, what difference does it make? But if you want to make sure it stays dry, then rent a storage facility that's high up and hopefully won't get hit by a hurricane, and you'll be
tornado.
okay.
In multiple platforms. So go ahead, but multiple platforms.
Yeah, you're right that we have a huge vulnerability to technology, and we rely on it every day. We do exercises where I take everyone's cell phone and turn off all of the technology we have in our operations center, and we start in the dark. My 27-year-olds go berserk because they don't know how to do things without technology. So redundancy is huge. Yes, you can have it in the cloud, but if you don't have access, you've lost it. You got to have it on paper. But we also, after every disaster, I scan every document we have, and we scan it and we store it, and we have it on drives, and you can get a massive amount of gigs now on a drive, and that drive has all those documents, and that drive is what we take with us, and that's in my go bag in our continuity of operations. So our complete capability is on one drive that I can go anywhere with. That way you can have it, but you got to scan your documents. You don't go grab your files. You don't go grab that desk we talked about earlier where you keep the insurance policy next to the extra set of keys that goes to the safety deposit box when it ends up in Matagorda County, right? You got to have redundancy and capabilities. So you can have it in the cloud, you can keep your paper copies, but scan it.
I'm just going to reaffirm what he just said, but so I'm probably going to take a gander and probably the youngest person on the panel. Android, iPad, right? I have a full USB hard drive in my office. I have a full USB hard drive at home because even when we are in charge of making sure you guys are, when we're dealing with an event, we also are people too, and we're dealing with our stuff. So I make sure I have all of my stuff handily available on 4 different platforms so that while I'm trying to help get Dickinson back up and running, I'm also able to still keep myself running too.
And this is just an FYI, if anyone flooded, you need to keep your receipts from those repairs for 10 years so that if you get flooded again, you have to prove that you replaced it or fixed it, otherwise you won't get paid for it again.
Any other questions? And this will be our last question, comment.
Usually I don't need a mic. I'd like to make a comment. Mark covered so much, and so did the chief and all of you. But one thing that I went to my physician for was all of my medical on a thumb drive. It's small, it's quick, but then I asked him to back it up again. But I do believe in all the platforms. I am one that has that hard line hardwired into my home, and we actually used it during one of the emergencies a few years ago because everyone around me had only depended upon cells. I was one of them that I didn't have electricity, but had a generator. And so we operated out of my kitchen where the landline was because I'd hit it. No one has a landline that they want to be proud of anymore, I guess. But those simple things that you talked about, I just really appreciate the fact that they're bringing it to businesses and to small businesses, because once you go out, you'll go back into the community. Now, and I'm a believer of CERT. I went through the course and I've worked it. If you do anything today that you take away, go to a CERT class. It's going to make a world of difference for you, your business, and your community. But thank y'all.
Thank you.
That's well said, and on behalf of SCORE and on behalf of everybody here, let's please give them a great big thank you for what they've done.
Yep.
I just want to, is this on? I just want to say thank you to all of these men and all of their teams for everything they do to keep us safe, because I really think that they do a fantastic job at keeping us informed and making sure we're all safe. And I think we need to thank them for everything that they are doing for us. So.
So, Mark Sloan, Emergency Management Coordinator for Harris County's Office of Emergency Management. Chief George Buenik, the Director of Houston Mayor's Office for Public Safety and Homeland Security. Janice Jucker, co-owner of Three Brothers Bakery. Chris Hurd, the City Administrator for the City of Dickinson. And Judge Nate McDonald, County Judge of Matagorda County. Janice, Nate, George, Mark, and Chris, thanks for talking with us, and thanks everybody for coming.
And thank you, Shaun.